Have you ever heard of Erbil? Despite threats from Baghdad, it seems probable that geography students will soon have to learn the name of this capital city as well as its new country, and that would be Iraqi Kurdistan. The 25th of December this year was a historical moment for the more than 5 million Kurds who currently live in this autonomous community in the north of Iraq. And, well, why was this? Well, that's because after decades of unfulfilled promises and ethnic repression, they had the opportunity to vote in a referendum organized by the regional government of Kurdistan. Since 2005, and according to the Constitution of Iran, Kurdistan is an autonomous region. Despite it being an autonomous region, though, this place essentially worked as its own, almost independent country. And the result of this was that the population really wanted to be fully independent. The day of the referendum, Kurds showed up en masse to the polling stations. Even the speakers of mosques encouraged voters to go to the polls. Well, the final results showed the referendum was a complete success. More than 7 out of every 10 Kurds went to vote. That's almost 3.1 million voters. The victory, well, it was overwhelming for those who supported independence. The movement, it obtained 92.73% of the vote. And you know what? Well, this triumph, it's totally understandable because we're talking about some of the most ill-treated people in history. They were ill-treated despite the fact that the Kurds are, according to many experts, the most ancient people in this entire region. It is estimated that their culture, their language, their rituals, essentially everything that could define them, have been in this part of the world, Upper Mesopotamia, for more than 4,000 years. In fact, many of these experts consider the city center of Erbil, the capital, as the oldest human settlement to be continuously inhabited on the planet. In other words, the Kurds are older than the Persians, or indeed the Arabs. However, they have suffered from all kinds of persecution. See, the total number of Kurds is around 30 million, spread across mainly 4 countries: Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. Well, in all of these places, the Kurds have suffered the consequences of nationalism, which has tried to make them disappear as a community. They have tried to end their culture, their language, as well as trying to close down their media outlets. Between 1986 and 1989, Saddam Hussein launched the Anfal campaign, and estimations are that between 50,000 and 180,000 Kurds died as a result. As you might imagine, this cannot easily be forgotten.
My grandfather had a good sense of humor. He used to say that he was born a Kurd in a free country. Then the Ottomans arrived and said to my grandfather, "You're Ottoman." At the fall of the Ottoman Empire, he became Turkish. The Turks left, and he became a Kurd again. Then the British arrived, so my grandfather became a subject of His Gracious Majesty. The British invented Iraq, so my grandfather became Iraqi. But to his dying breath, he was never proud of being Iraqi. Hiner Salim, my father's rifle, a childhood in Kurdistan.
Considering the history, it's no surprise that the Kurds want, once and for all, to make the dream of having their own state come true. And if we add up the fact that Iraqi Kurdistan is quite a rich area in terms of oil and natural gas, as well as fresh water by the way, we can understand even more why they want independence. So to sum up, the Kurds, they wanted their own country, and so they held a referendum in order to do that.
The referendum.
As we have said, Kurdistan is almost an independent country already. They even have their own army of more than 200,000 soldiers. This army is called the Peshmerga, and they've, by the way, been the main defense to Islamic State in Iraq. Do bear this in mind, because the government of Kurdistan is a close ally of Washington. Indeed, it may be their most loyal ally in the region. Because of this, the US has trained, financed, and, well, armed their army. Some indeed even say that the Kurds are as pro-American as the Texans. So, after many difficult years of intense fighting against Islamic State, it has been clear for the Kurds that there are almost no advantages in remaining in Iraq. And the government of Erbil took advantage of these battles in order to integrate Kurd areas into their political space. For example, there is the province of Kirkuk, who has a majority of Kurds but was not within the autonomous region of Kurdistan. Kirkuk is something of a crown jewel and one of the main reasons for the conflict with the Iraqi government, who, by the way, has not hesitated to send their troops over to recover the settlement.
Iraqi forces sweep into Kirkuk, checking Kurdish independence drive.
So why is this territory so valuable? Well, that's because Kirkuk is the province that contains the most oil in Kurdistan. In fact, it's been estimated that around 10% of all Iraqi oil reserves are concentrated here in Kirkuk, and nobody wants to let go. In 2007, a referendum. It should have been conducted in order to incorporate, or not, the autonomous region of Kurdistan, but the voting, it never took place. So when the Peshmerga occupied the city in order to protect it from Islamic State, since the Iraqi army had literally run away, the Kurd government had de facto annexed the territory. So with these conditions, and with the constant negotiations between Baghdad and Erbil, and with a growing disconnect between both territories, they eventually got the referendum.
This is the first time in history that the people of Kurdistan will freely decide their future. After that, we will start talks with Baghdad to reach an agreement over borders, water, and oil. Mr. Barzani, president of Iraqi Kurdistan.
Now, the government of Iraq opposed this referendum in every way, and the Constitutional Court of Iraq even outlawed it. Parliament asked for many things, including the withdrawal of diplomatic representation in Erbil, a border closure, and even army deployments. In Kirkuk, there was also the prosecution of organizers of the referendum, and of course, Parliament tried their best to remain in control of all of the oil. But even with this kind of action by the Iraqi government, the Kurds, they didn't really care. And that's only logical, because despite the progress of the Iraqi army, the risk for Kurdistan is probably not in Iraq, but rather with the international community. You see, Turkey and Iran, they don't even want to hear about an independent Kurdistan. That's because it might give the Kurds in their territories the idea that they can replicate this success. Turkey, for instance, has been at war with the Kurds for decades, but that's a story for another day. The thing is that these countries have allied with Iraq in order to defy the referendum.
Turkey's military has confirmed that Turkey and Iraq will conduct joint military drills in Turkey along an area bordering Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region. Iran's semi-official ISNA news agency reported on Sunday that the Supreme National Security Council closed Iranian airspace to the Iraqi Kurdish area at the request of the central government in Baghdad.
And no, it's not just about the possibility of conflict. After all, it is likely to be the result of fear tactics, which are very usual in this kind of situation, and they rarely work, by the way. Remember, Kurdistan is a close ally of the USA, and they have an experienced and well-trained army. No, the bigger issue here might be that Kurdistan, they need their neighbors. This territory, it's landlocked, and they are very dependent on Turkey, both in order to export their oil and to import anything that they might need. So a trade blockade, it would be a serious threat for this territory.
The KRG's economy depends on one pipeline that sells oil to international markets, and that pipeline goes through Turkey. You shut down that pipeline, you choke the Kurdish economy. Bilal Wahab, analyst at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy.
But there is more to it than just their neighbors. Nobody wants any more tension with this part of the world, so internationally speaking, the referendum didn't get much support. The US has opposed it, and Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, has described it as dangerous and potentially disruptive. And today, Israel is the only country that supports independence. So this might mean the future's not looking very good, right? Well, wait just a second, because despite all of this, it is very likely that Kurdistan will achieve independence sooner or later.
The reasons for a new country.
Iraqi Kurdistan, it's got many issues. However, they have managed to become the region that functions the best in Iraq. They are the safest and wealthiest area.
I've been to Iraqi Kurdistan a number of times. It's safer than Kansas. If you're coming from Baghdad or Mosul, it's practically Switzerland. Michael J. Totten, American journalist.
Check this out. In 2014, before the IS offensive, this region was turning into the most relevant financial and tourist spot in Iraq, an oasis for many businessmen, both local and foreign. Skyscrapers, malls, and mansions were spreading like mushrooms after the rain. That was until war broke out in Iraq against the Islamic State. Then, most of this development, it simply had to stop. Now, after an awful few years of war, in 2017, the numbers, they're bouncing back. And do remember that this area is oil rich. Some estimations calculate the oil reserves of Kurdistan at 45 billion barrels. To put this into words, Kurdistan would be among the 15 oil-richest countries on Earth. And this is in a country with little more than 5 million inhabitants. But there's still so much more. Iraq's Kurdistan is quite business-friendly. Indeed, they like private initiatives, something uncommon in this part of the globe. Taxes are also attractive, and bureaucracy is not excessive either. Unfortunately, though, there is still plenty of corruption.
The Kurdistan government will do its best to help the private sector and have them invest here. I invite all local and foreign investors here to take advantage of our laws and offers and invest. Masoud Barzani, President of Iraqi Kurdistan.
The thing is that this region has enough going for it to make Kurdistan a prosperous country. They have fertile land, high levels of safety, and natural resources. Further, their geographical location is beneficial. It's a place between Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. But on top of all of that, this new country, it's only, well, fair. The Kurd people, and especially Iraqi Kurds, have been deported, attacked with chemical weapons, and have suffered all sorts of social engineering in order to strangle their culture. And now they have an opportunity to build their own country. Further, the rest of us could also benefit from a more moderate, prosperous, and free country than the ones around it. And the Middle East would certainly be better for it. So now we've got to consider the problems in Iraqi Kurdistan. I mean, first of all, are there any? Well, yes, absolutely, but that's no excuse to not make this new country happen. First, because these problems exist now, with them still being a part of Iraq, and second, because they are less serious than the ones in the rest of the country. So what about corruption? Yes, it's totally there, and is there oil dependency? Also yes, and what about debt? Well, yes, there is that too. But this is totally normal in this part of the world. The rest of Iraq is in a much worse situation. Well, anyway, we just wish that Baghdad's response does not turn the situation into a military conflict. That would be a terrible scenario for everyone. Indeed, it would be a situation where political interests prevail above the interests of the people. But now it's time for your opinion. Do you support the idea of the independence of Kurdistan? Well, do leave your answer in the comments below, as well as in this survey, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and Thursday. Also, do not forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine, and as always, thank you for watching. So you're still here, still watching this video. Maybe you just let it run and you're not actually there anymore. Whatever the case, if you're listening to this, I think you should go check out my new channel. It's called Biographies. It is biographies of notable historic figures, as well as present day people. Let me give you some examples. We got the Queen of England, Vladimir Putin. Those just two people on the world stage. We also got Elon Musk coming up, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Even the first serial killer, H.H. Holmes? Maybe just H.H. Holmes. We look at all sorts of people, longer form, about 20 minutes long, diving into the story of their lives in a similar style to this. It's Biographics. If you like this channel, if you like my other stuff, you're gonna like this as well. Biographics, there is a link in the description below. Do go check it out, and please do subscribe.